Hello Internet, this is Dave, and in my last video, I recorded sounds from an Apple and I made a little tune and I just used sound design to turn it into instruments. I thought today I would tell you a little bit about how I did that by creating the kick, the snare, and hi-hat in similar ways. Sound design with Dave. Before we get started, if you don't mind hitting the like button and subscribing to my channel and even just saying hi in the comments, it would really help support my channel and I would appreciate it. So I'm here in Ableton and the first thing I want to do is find the low end for my kick. Okay, I like this one. I'm going to drag this one on. And here's what we're starting with. And I can zoom in here, trim that off. Okay, so first I'm gonna put an EQ on there. And what I typically do with most of my samples is I get rid of anything below 30 Hertz and then I start looking at the rest of the spectrum to see what I could do with it to enhance. So I don't really need all this up here, mostly because we're going to be filling that in later. One thing I want to mention is what I'm doing is not necessarily the right way. The best thing you can do is experiment and spend a lot of time figuring out your own way to do things that works for you. I'm going to add erosion, which is just adds noise. So I'm going to use wide noise. If you want to think about it this way, this could actually be emulating the snare wire on the bottom of the snares rattling when the kick hits the floor. Okay, I feel pretty good about that. So now I want to add some saturation. So I'm going to drag the saturator down here, add some drive, take the output down to match, and then I'm going to go with this curve here and hear what it sounds like. Let's put it before the erosion. Now I want to add a layer or two to put the punch in there for the kick. I'm going to take a piece of this. I want it to be kind of crunchy. So let's hear what this sounds like as the click or the punch of the kick drum. So it's pretty bright. So I'm going to put an EQ on it and I'm going to tame that a bit. First, I'll take off the low end. Okay, bring it down just a bit more. And then I'm going to add one more layer, one of these drops. That's good. And again, I'm going to add an EQ to this. Another thing I'll do sometimes is I will add an overdrive, just put some drive on one of these layers. Yeah, that's what I wanted. Then I'm going to group these tracks and I'm going to put a transient shaper from kilohertz where I can either boost or cut the attack. I can kind of give it this, what they call a pump effect, and you can see what's happening when I move this. But that takes away a lot of the kick bass right there. And then I can cut the sustain to make it shorter or boost it. You can also take this speed and slow it down or speed it up. That actually gives it a lot of punch. So then what I would do is I would add an audio track. I would select resampling, and then I would record. And now I have my kick. Again, this is my way. Doesn't have to be your way. I'm going to search drum rack. I'm going to add a drum rack. I'm going to rename this Apple Kick 1. And then I am going to drag this onto my drum rack. Now let's do the snare drum. What I'm going to be looking for is something that can emulate the body of the snare drum, the tone that the drum is creating. None of these sounds work perfectly for this, but there are a lot of things that I can do. I could put an EQ on this. The problem with it is that I don't have a lot of tone to work with. So I could boost something and then try to artificially create tone. Or I could use what's called a corpus, which is just a resonator. And so it just takes a signal and then it creates its own resonating tone. And this one has several different, I guess what you would call algorithms, maybe. There's beam, marimba, string, membrane, plate, pipe, and tube. So I'm going to try membrane. And it kind of sounds like an out of tune drum. So I'm going to do 200 hertz here. And then I'm going to mess with some of these things. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just experimenting. So I'm going to start with that. I kind of like that as the body of the snare drum. Okay, now we're going to add some punch and then the noise from the snares themselves. Well, this is a stick on an apple, so it should work. So that sort of sounds like if you were to play a snare drum without the snares turned on. And I can add some overdrive to this as well, and even an erosion to try to get that feeling of stick on surface. Now let's add the snares. So this one was where I was rubbing the apple and it kind of gave this shaker feel. And I'm going to use that as the guts or the snare strands. So I don't want it to attack initially because the attack happens and then they respond. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to artificially create my own decay here. I'm just going to turn the dry wet down. I'm going to pan a couple of these things. Actually, I'm going to keep the tone in the middle. I'm going to add one more layer. So I really like this part of the chewing, and I'm going to add that to thicken up the snare drum, and I'll show you how. So I offset it a bit. Sounds a little bit like a clap. And then I am going to add, well, let's first EQ it. Then I can group these, and then I can start messing with it from a macro standpoint. You could do the same thing with a transient shaper. That's cool. And now I'm going to add some multi-band compression to glue it all together. Not that much. I'm going to mess with this. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to solo that track, and then I'm going to add an audio track, resampling, record enable, and record. Even if you have samples of drums that you already like, adding Foley and other interesting sounds can make your drums really cool and have dimension. Let's call this one Apple Snare 1. Consolidate it, put it in my drum rack. Kick, snare. Now we just need to add the hi-hat. I can go back into my library, find this rub. You might have already known I was going to do this by hearing it. And I can just select a piece of the audio. And because of the frequency that this is at, sounds like a shaker already. So I just need to trim it to sound like a hi-hat. And I could scrub around with this. I like that as a hi-hat. So we'll call this Apple Hi-Hat 1, Command J to consolidate it, and then we will drag it onto the drum rack and into its home. So now kick, snare, hi-hat. So hopefully that helped. I hope you learned something. If you did, let me know in the comments, like this video, and subscribe so you can see my next videos, and it would really help support my channel, and I thank you. That's all for today, and I will see you in the next one.
Like, comment, subscribe. 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 Like,